Hey guys, we're here for episode 25 of the e-commerce opportunity, where I'm joined by Josh. Hey Josh, how are you?
Doing well, man. How about yourself?
Doing well, thank you. Do you mind kind of starting with what you're working on right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, my name is Josh. I run a company called Gainfluence. We work with pre-Series A consumer tech startups. So anything spanning from e-commerce, D2C, all the way to consumer fintech and consumer fintech, that stuff in general. So we're helping them grow so they can raise their Series A.
Awesome. And when you say you're helping them grow, like what are the main levers or channels that you're leveraging for that growth?
Yeah. So most of the companies we work with are very early. Most of them just raised a seed round, so the clock is ticking. They're looking to, raise that Series A in like 12 to 18 months, right? So they really need to hit that, like, whatever, like the 50% to 100% month to month, cumulative growth rate. Um, Most of them come to me for acquisition. So they think they have a problem with the acquisition channel they're running on, or the mechanism, the tactics they're running their ads with. But a lot of them, they come to me, take a look at their ads, and most of the time the problem is their niche is off, their offer is off. They haven't quite found that, product market fit, right? And that's kind of where I come in, and I help them, really nail in that offer. And then we start running the ads, and testing ad creatives, influencer marketing, that sort of thing.
Awesome. And what is your background? Is it on the SaaS side? Is it on the e-com side? Like what is your background?
Yeah, so I started out I was a product manager at Dropbox, so kind of an unconventional background for someone in ecom, but I was a lead product manager for Dropbox Paper. That's the Word document product at Dropbox. Also was A/B testing, running A/B experiments for Dropbox Business. So upselling free users to Dropbox Pro, Dropbox Business, and that's kind of where I learned growth. So how do you so top of funnel, how do you get users in, and how do you retain them? How do you make sure they don't churn? And if they do churn, how do you run email marketing like you do, to get them to come back? So that's where I started, and the first market I tackled was ecom D2C. That is kind of where the biggest opportunity was, and working with a lot of founders who bought a ton of inventory and they can't clear it. Right, that's kind of where I started, and so helping them clear inventory, and then we moved out to companies who were funded. So they just raised a seed round, like I said, and they're just looking to scale and grow at that point. So using a bunch of different mechanisms, anything from A/B testing their landing page all the way down to what I'm really focused on right now on the acquisition side, which is building out like a raw content pipeline for these folks to use to test. What is that format that can get me that like 7x ROAS on Facebook ads, TikTok ads, that sort of thing.
Awesome. I want to talk about the content in one second, but how
Yeah.
did you go from working at Dropbox to working for yourself, and how did you get your first client?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was at Dropbox for about 2.5 years. I was running a growth team. Dropbox Paper was essentially launched out of my team. It's essentially like a top of funnel feature to get people into the funnel. So, the way Dropbox makes money is they have several different like levers. So Dropbox Paper was one, the free products, Dropbox free product was another one. Get a ton of users in, and then they upsell the crap out of you on like the back end, right? So desktop notifications, email marketing, anytime. I don't know if anyone uses Dropbox, but the second you log in, there's like 20 different banners, right, telling you to pay them. So I was the one like kind of running those kind of things, and yeah, when you're a PM at one of these big tech companies, you're constantly getting hit up by every startup under the sun, right? Because they think your process is gonna blow their startup up, right? Which is not true. Like at a tech company, a big tech company, what you're focused on is process, right? And that is not necessarily what like a startup needs, right? So I saw a huge need there. Like these startups, like they really need help. They're not growing fast enough. Their CAC or their CPA, whatever their the MRR is just like they're struggling, right? So saw a big opportunity there, to help them, not necessarily using everything I learned from Dropbox, which could be a different use case, but really helping them dial in, like how do you test things, how do you test offers, right? How do you test different niches, which is super important at that stage. And I was also friends with a bunch of VCs. I was in San Francisco for like 4 years So, they were introducing me to their portfolio companies that were struggling. So I don't know anyone's in the VC world, but like 90% of these funds portfolio companies are struggling, right? They're all kind of betting on that top like 1% to be the next Uber. So they just had a bunch of companies who need help. So that's kind of how I got started. A lot of these companies that I came in were ecom. So, at one point I was just making more money from that than what Dropbox was paying me. So I just, ended up leaving and doing that full time.
Got it. So you had the full-time job, you kind of were doubling up, doing some side work, kind of some consulting.
Yep.
That thing accelerated faster than the Dropbox thing is. You went full-time.
Absolutely.
So what does your team look like today? And like, what are some of the roles on your team? Like, what are these people doing? Like, I guess the big question is like, what is your process? And I'm not asking for your secrets, but like, what is your process? Like, what does your team look like and how do you work clients? And what is that end result?
Yeah, definitely. So on the ecom side, we were getting a lot of, we're getting a lot who they just raised a round, right? They just raised a seed round. So our team is 3 people total, with Victoria and Anna, who are mainly sort of managing the campaign process. When I say campaign, that could be anything from, hey, like I just raised a round, I got some inventory. Like I need to grow like 5x what I'm doing right now. So we go in and we're looking at like, okay, like who's your audience, right? Like, is your offer actually hitting a nerve? So anything from looking at their Facebook ads manager to looking at their GA dashboard to looking at their landing page, the UX flow, all these things. And that's more on Anna's side. Victoria's side, we're really testing heavily on Facebook ads right now with influencer creatives. So she's the one that kind of manages our network of influencers. We have about 10,000 following us on Instagram. We have about another 20,000 who follow us on our email. So managing that network and working with these creators to create like, that perfect like sort of format, and also helping these brands build out that content pipeline. So anyone who runs Facebook ads, a big struggle is how do I get like a pipeline going, right? So how do I just consistently get 50, 100, 200 different pieces of video creatives every single month? Because one thing works in February, it doesn't work again in March, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's you saturate your audience, or it could be some other brand saw what you're doing, right? They went through your ads library and they copied your format. It doesn't work anymore, right? Because everyone's now is doing that now. So constantly refreshing that creative and working with the creators. So that's kind of our operation right now. Me personally, I'm focused on building partnerships. So I'm spending all day talking to either founders or VCs or angel investors to sort of just get brands in. Yeah, and also kind of, going outside of our current vertical. So looking at, right now we're going heavily in supplements right now. So talking to a lot of supplement folks. So having these kind of conversations.
Nice. And just to clarify, so are you guys providing the assets for, top of funnel marketers to actually run, or are you also managing the paid spend and running that too?
Yeah. So right now we're focused mainly on the creatives. So that's a great question. We used to run some of the ads, as everyone knows, like that process, the media buying process is getting automated like every day, right? Facebook is getting better and better at, finding your audience for you. So a lot of the tactics, everyone's talking about even like 6 months ago, it's not super relevant today. And then with like iOS 14 and, just a lot of the, pixelating and how do you, someone looks at my ad, they go on Google and they come back. How do I do attribution? A lot of these things are, they're just not as relevant anymore. So so right now, the number one thing I tell people, the most important thing you can do on the acquisition side is building out that raw content pipeline. It's not even necessarily like, figuring out like what is the, number one silver bullet format, because it's going to change every month, right? So it's how do I build out that like network of, if you're using influencers, how do I build out that network of creators, right, over time? And it's going to take years. How do I constantly have a process of iterating every month based on the results, right? So some of the stuff I learned from Dropbox, like super relevant. So really sort of nailing down that pipeline is kind of what we're focused on. Buying ads right now is just not adding that much value.
Yep, makes sense. That's helpful. So in terms of like the assets that you're creating, a lot of it sounds like it's centered and geared towards the top of the funnel. Are there
Right.
other use cases of the assets where you're creating specifically, lifestyle or product shots, or you're creating assets for email? Are you specifically focused on creative for top of the funnel, or is your creative kind of universal where it could be used across, whatever the mechanism is?
Absolutely. That's a great one. We are using a lot of UGC right now on landing pages. So we are currently partnered with three like Shopify agencies. The agencies who are building out the sites. A lot of venture studios. We work with them. Like they're focused on launching new brands, which really entails like just launching the website right on Shopify and using UGC creatives, influencer creatives. Especially if you're in a space, if you're selling a product that requires a lot of trust. So I mean, supplements, right? We talked earlier outside of ecom, like fintech, right? Like fintech is a lot of trust problems, right? You got to put in your social security number, right? Like, who are you? Like, why should I put in, my personal info into this funnel? And if anyone's familiar with like consumer fintech in particular, personal finance, that sort of thing, you need UGC, right? Or nobody's gonna sign up. So so a lot of this is being used now on landing pages. Anything that's a little bit complex, so either in terms of like using the products or going the line stuff like supplements, like what does this actually do? Like what are the ingredients in this? What are the actual benefits? Also applies to some skincare products that are a little bit more niche. We're working with this company right now, Beauty Stat, right? It's a vitamin C like skin refiner, right? There's some nuances like what does this exactly do, and it's also targeted more sort of like an older audience. So they want to know like every single thing that's in this bottle, right? So when they land on your landing page, like explainer video of like your customers and customers who look like you in the video, that's kind of what's converting the actual sale itself. And putting that on the landing page could be the checkout page. Definitely underutilized right now. I don't see a lot of brands doing this. And I think it's a big opportunity that they're missing, is if you're having shopping cart abandonment problems or people are just like, putting stuff in the cart and they're not buying, try doing that. I think we've seen a lot of good results doing that.
That's awesome. So question I have in terms of like the influencers that you're working with, how important is their following size? Like, does it matter? Does it not matter if you're just looking for good creative? Are you more looking for people that just have like the aesthetic on their profile that you matter to your brands on a particular basis, or does their follower size help?
Yeah, dude, these are spot on questions. So the answer is no. People think we do like purely influence marketing. Just our company's name is Gainfluence. It makes sense. That's people think like I'm like a influencer media buyer. I used to do that stuff, not quite anymore. I used to buy YouTube videos from like David Dobrik and Mr. Beast back in like 2018. That's kind of how I got started in this stuff. But yeah, I mean, like the controversial answer is like influence marketing, like the way most people do it, like doesn't really work, right? If you're spending like a $5,000 on like Instagram post or Instagram whatever, Instagram story, YouTube video, whatever, your product costs $10. You're not going to move 500 units from that post, right? It's ridiculous, So the second thing I tell people is Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, if you're running on that, like those platforms will always be better at finding your audience than what you're doing manually, right? What I mean by that is when you're running Facebook ads, that their algorithm, their ML is going to be better at finding your customer better than an influencer sharing that on their channel. And the only people that see that are like her audience, right? Yeah. Like it's essentially organic, right? If you think about it, so the way to do it is getting content, people who are just really good content creators, regardless of follower size, regardless of what their account looks like, what their grid looks like, their aesthetics. If they're good at making content, they understand your products, they look like the audience that you're selling to, right? If you have that nailed down already, that's really what matters, right? It's not necessarily one of our clients right now, supplement company, their best performing ad is something I shot, like myself. So I literally went downstairs to my lobby, took my iPhone, I shot something, and it outperformed like everything they've ever done, and the company's been around for like 4 years. So, and like, there's so much like young guys, right? So yeah, that's kind of the key there is people generally misunderstand influencer marketing, thinking it's like sponsored posts, you got to spend a lot of money, when in reality, the platform ads will do better than anything you can ever do.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. So in terms of whether someone like wants to work with you or even kind of replicate a process, that's similar or different for themselves, like what are the kind of primary steps that someone needs to take? Like, do they just need a product with a label and some branding? Do they need a website? Like for someone to work with you or to do this themselves in-house, like what steps would someone need to take just to be ready?
Yeah, so I would say the companies we have the most success with are if you have a niche and an offer dialed in, right? So if you kind of think about the product market fit like process, right? I said earlier, brands come to me thinking I can help them with acquisition, like at their acquisition channel. When that's like the last thing you should be worrying about, right? It's important, but it's like the last step in the process, right? That comes after you have your niche dialed in, you have the problem dialed in, like what their problem is. You have like what they call like the transformation, right? Like what is your promise to these customers? So for skincare, it'd be like before and after, right? Like removing acne, whatever it might be. Pricing, right? That sort of thing. Like these things all come before how do you do targeting on Facebook ads, right? Or what channel I should be running on, which is what most people think they come to me for. So I would say someone come to me if you have your niche and if you really like understand like your customers, what the actual problem, you have all that dialed in, and we can just like skyrocket your growth. That's perfect. But even before that, if you don't quite have that nailed in, like we can I help a lot of companies test, right? There was a company, I worked with, in the past 2 weeks. The reason that they thought their customers were buying from him were not the actual reason they're buying, right? That happens all the time. They just had a fundamental misunderstanding of the market, right? So we help them get got different ad creatives from different people, doing different offers. So testing different offers to different audiences, and then eventually found one that kind of worked for them. And then like that was reflected in like their CAC, right, and their growth rate. So I would say both, but preferably if you have like your niche already dialed in, we can just like make it skyrocket a lot easier.
Awesome. In terms of like the final product, right? Like the creatives that the brand is going to receive to run or to leverage, how much of that is like them coming to you after they have some of those things saying, I want it shot this particular way, and here are some examples? Or how much of that is you saying to them with you and your two team members, the three of you guys saying, hey, based off your demo and what we know, based off other things we've seen or other things that we've shot, you guys need to do it like this. Like how much of it is them coming to you with the vision, or are you kind of driving the vision with your agency?
Yeah, that's a great question. The number one thing I tell most brands, especially founders who have like hit it a few times, meaning like they had to exit before, because then they think like they know like everything that like that works. It's I always tell them like first principles, right? Like you always assume you don't know anything, right? I've done multiple lifestyle brands, I've done multiple supplement brands, I've done multiple skincare brands, and it's different every single time. There is no like one playbook. If you think about the number of factors that go into an ad succeeding, there's a lot of factors, right? Timing, for example, right? Like if you're doing like the thing right now with apparel, right? It's the conventional wisdom is lifestyle images, right? That's kind of what converts, right? We just did one with this like handbag company, and that wasn't the case, because everyone is now running lifestyle images, right? Because if you go into any like Facebook ads, Facebook group, right, that's what they tell you, right? It's get someone to do like go to brunch, like take a photo of them at brunch with their handbag, like that's kind of what they tell you. And then a million brands did it. It doesn't work anymore. So things are constantly changing. You got to always be reiterating. So what we kind of tell them is, you don't know anything, number one. And number two, it's much more important to build out like a content pipeline, like focus on the process, not like the actual format, right? So the analogy with investing is don't pick stocks, like put in like an index fund or something, right? You might not agree with that, but it's kind of what I'm suggesting for the creative side. So that you have this like all-weather portfolio. So it doesn't matter if iOS 14 comes out. It doesn't matter these platform changes. It doesn't matter what happens that are external. If you have this content pipeline, you can get great content a larger volume of great content because you had this network of creators built up, that's kind of what you should be focused on, right? It's much more logistical than like, I'm going to bet on this one thing, right? Which never works because things are constantly changing. So we do have some best practices. I always ask them, what are some of the creatives that I performed in the past? Just so I can get some insight into your customer's psychology, right? Like, oh, this happened because of why, right? So I have something to go off of. But after month 4, it's pretty much, you're kind of starting from scratch.
That's awesome. And then final question I have, I'm super appreciative of your time and your insight. Do you ever think about like number of credit needed based off of number of dollars being spent per month? So for example, like say someone's going to spend $1,000, $10,000, $100,000. With the number of creatives each company, like the recommendation that you say at $1,000 you need X, at $10,000 you need 2X. Like, do you have any framework or any kind of like roadmap that you look at based off of like spend, or do you not look at it that way?
That's a great question. I typically go off of different assets. So depending on what you're already doing, like if you've been running ads for like 6 months, you already have some kind of process going. Like it's hard for me to go in there and like scratch everything, start from new. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit more complicated than that because there are a lot of brands we work with who are like, they're still testing their offers, for example, right? So they might have like 10 different assets, and they're testing like 20 different offers, whatever it might be, right? So then for each offer, we're like, okay, well, month 1, let's do 3 creatives for this offer A, and for offer A, and then the three creatives for that offer are 3 different formats. So one could be unboxing, one could be testimonial, another one could be lifestyle, whatever it is, right?
Got it.
So I think about it less about like as a percentage of ad spend, but more from a sense of like, what are you trying to do here, right? What is the purpose? What is the end goal, right? If you're testing offers or you're testing niches or you're testing formats, that's ultimately, then you can like mathematically kind of build out this framework of, of the quantity of creatives you're going to be testing for each variable. So that makes sense.
Awesome. And the last question I actually just thought of, sorry. With all like the iOS 14 stuff and whatnot, has your process and kind of your thinking changed, or is it the same?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is no. So based on going off of what I said earlier, the end goal for most brands when you're running Facebook is you don't want to worry about these kind of things, right? Like it's going to affect you obviously, but your goal should be to, like I said, like build out that what I call like that all-weather portfolio of creative. So like that content pipeline, right? That like it just kind of it just comes in, right? It comes in, you put on the ads, you kind of shut out the noise, regardless of what happens. Because also now it's, your ad creatives are ultimately what determines the performance, right? It's not really what you're doing like on targeting or whatnot these days, right? Is testing copy, is testing creative, it's testing your PDP, that sort of thing. Just all the, the 3 big components of what a Facebook ad is. So that's ultimately what determines performance. So I tell founders, like, don't worry too much about everything else. Just focus on building that raw content pipeline. And in the long run, like it will work out.
Sweet. Josh, appreciate you answering all these questions. Really appreciate the insight. Thank you so much for being here. Best way for someone to follow you, work with you, work for you? What's the best way for someone to get in touch?
Yeah, you can drop me a DM on Instagram, just at Gainfluence.
Gainfluence?
Gainfluence. That is GAINFLUENCE.
Awesome. I'll grab that link and I'll drop it below. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for your time.
All right. Cheers.